So he had been a slave. He was enslaved to a white man named John Emerson in Missouri. But then during the time that Emerson was holding this man as a slave, he moved several times, including moving out of Missouri. He moved to the Wisconsin Territory. He moved to the state of Illinois, both of which were not slave territories or slave states, both of which were free. So that created an unusual situation. A white man and an African-American man he has enslaved. They start in Missouri. They travel to and live in free territory for a time, and then ultimately they move back to slave state Missouri. All right, when the white man died, the African-American man who had been enslaved to him, he tried to buy his own freedom from the dead man's family, from the dead man's widow, and the family refused to allow him to buy his freedom. The enslaved man then decided that he would sue for his freedom. He would turn to the courts. And the basis for him suing for his freedom was that time in the free territory of Wisconsin and the free state of Illinois. If an enslaved person was moved into free territory, into a free state, they're freed from enslavement. And that is something that can't be reversed, even if you go back to Missouri. Once free, always free. So he sued on that basis in 1846. And it took forever. But finally, the case was the subject of a ruling in the United States Supreme Court. It was a decision that, hands down, no argument, is considered to this day to be the worst United States Supreme Court decision of all time. And part of that was its form. It was sloppy and flagrantly wrong on the facts and the history and the law. It was poorly reasoned. Its logic was just a broken pretzel. But the Chief Justice who wrote that Supreme Court opinion apparently wanted the outcome that he wanted, and he got it. And that Supreme Court justice is remembered today for basically nothing else other than that terrible decision, the worst decision ever handed down by the United States Supreme Court. Because the enslaved man who sued for his freedom in the case that led to that terrible ruling was a man named Scott, Dred Scott. And in his ruling in the Dred Scott case, it was Chief Justice Roger Taney that wrote the ruling. And he ruled that not only was Mr. Scott not entitled to be free, he ruled that Mr. Scott did not have standing to even sue for his freedom. Because as an African-American, he was not a citizen of the United States. He couldn't be, because no African-American in this ruling, according to Judge Roger Taney in the Dred Scott ruling, no African-American was a citizen of the United States or ever could be a citizen of the United States because of their race. And so none of the protections and benefits and rights enshrined in the U.S. Constitution extended to black people, nor would they ever extend to black people. The Constitution was not for them and afforded them no rights and no protections. For good measure, Judge Taney also went on to say that the political compromise, the Missouri Compromise, that restricted the ability of some new states to even establish slavery in the first place, he said that compromise was unconstitutional too, effectively insisting from the United States Supreme Court that slavery could persist anywhere in the United States, and Congress could have nothing to say about that. And Americans of African descent were not citizens of the United States, and they never could be, and the Constitution didn't apply to them. Dred Scott. It's the worst thing the United States Supreme Court has ever done. The worst ruling, both in substance and in form, and, of course, in effect. I mean, the Dred Scott decision arguably nearly destroyed the country when it helped lead to the United States Civil War just a couple of years after the ruling was handed down. The worst Supreme Court decision ever. The ruling in the Dred Scott case, again, that was Chief Justice Roger Taney. And this is Chief Justice Roger Taney. This exact bust of him sits today in the United States Capitol. From 1810 to 1860, the United States Supreme Court held its sessions at the U.S. Capitol. They didn't have their own separate Supreme Court building like they did now. They sat in what's now called the Old Supreme Court Chamber on the first floor of the U.S. Capitol. The architect of the Capitol says since they moved out of there in 1860, that big room has been used as a library and as a committee room. It was even just used for storage for a while before they restored it to look essentially now like it did in the 1800s when the Supreme Court sat there. The way you get into that chamber, if you want to get in there, is you go through a robing room. And that is it's a funny word, but that's still a thing even in modern courtrooms today. Judges got to put on their robes somewhere. So you enter the courtroom through a robing room. But in this one particular robing room in the United States Capitol, which marks the entrance to this one very specific former chamber of the U.S. Supreme Court that was inside the U.S. Capitol, in the robing room there is a bust, a marble bust of just one person, Roger Taney, the man who wrote the Dred Scott decision trying to spread slavery throughout the United States and declaring that black people, by virtue of their race, were inherently not citizens and had no rights. It's just him in that room. It's not like that robing room is a hall of chief justices or something, or a hall of justices. It's just him. It's Roger Taney alone, looming over that entrance at the U.S. Capitol as of right now. Or how about not? How about we change that? Tonight, the House of Representatives voted to not do that anymore, to swap him out, to take down from that place of honor in the U.S. Capitol the justice who wrote the worst Supreme Court ruling of all time, and instead replace him with a different Supreme Court justice who didn't do that. How about Justice Thurgood Marshall, for example? Might he work in that spot instead? You know, the House actually passed a bill to take down the Roger Taney bust last summer. It passed in the Democratic-controlled House last July, but it never went anywhere. Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell blocked it. Republicans in the Senate never took it up. And so Taney still sits there in the robing room outside the old Senate, outside the old Supreme Court chamber in the U.S. Capitol. Now that Democrats are in control of the Senate, it's not Mitch McConnell there anymore. It's Chuck Schumer, who is the majority leader in the Senate. Now that it's Democrats controlling the House and the Senate, maybe old Roger Taney is finally going to get some downtime. Maybe we will stop that ongoing honor at the United States Capitol for him, see if somebody else might now get a turn in that place of honor. The vote tonight in the House, for the second time in 2 years, they've taken this vote. But the vote tonight in the House to take down the Roger Taney bust that is on display in the U.S. Capitol was 285 to 129. 120 members, Republican members of the House voting no, voting to keep him up there, the Dred Scott guy.